What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. Now, I'm excited about this episode, like all episodes, because we come together, we actually have conversations with people that are at the top of their game, that are moving, that are influencing in all areas of human endeavor with excellence. But one of the things that we do in this time is that we explore their God story. We explore how God has influenced, has guided, has been with them through this work, through their influence, how they think about this, God. And so I am thankful and I'm excited about this episode in particular because I'm here with my sister. I don't want to set her up. I'm gonna kind of sway in the universe a little bit, but Alexis Kerr, the new vice president of the Mahogany brand at Hallmark Cars, iconic. And previously she was head of multicultural marketing for Cadillac. Now, when I say Cadillac, I know that reverberates through the eons for our people. But even beyond that, she is more than just a marketer. She is a child of God who loves God. She is someone who loves our people, loves our culture, and sees the power of it, of uplifting the images, the leaders, the messages, the cultural impact, and lifting that for good. And so I'm excited. I'm grateful to introduce Miss Alexis Kerr. What's going on, sister?
Thank you so much. I'm definitely humbled to be before this audience and just to share. I think there's no time like this to be close to God, and there's no time like this to lean on God, whether it is in your personal life, your spiritual life, your corporate life. God is there. He is, for me anyway, the source of everything that I've done. So, just excited about this conversation. There's never a chance, except typically within the confines of church or with my, sister girls who we have been churning together, that you just freely get to speak about God and just how important He is. I would not be where I am today or where I'm going without God. And it's just talking about the essence of that God story. It's just powerful because people feel like you either have to choose between your faith or your morals and values in corporate America, and or the any other aspects of your life. And I dare to say that it all can be part of who you are, and it is truly a part of who you are. And bringing that to the workplace doesn't mean that you're going to be any more or less successful, but bringing it to the workplace means that you will be fulfilled. When that essence of God is really in you, and you know that you know that you know, there's no way it can be not brought in everything that you do. It may be more, maybe less. You may not use the language, but it's still there. And it's that essence with God people, and even people who aren't of God or of the same religion. It's that essence that people see that shines through. And so you can say less, but it shows more. And that's the Jesus that you just can't fake. And or it's the Jesus that even if you don't say it, people see it. And so it's that essence that, I come before you today just wholeheartedly and humbly sharing how good God has been. And that doesn't mean everything was perfect. It just means that I trusted and I knew that God had me. And in that place was so much comfort and love and support. And even in bad times or bad moments, God sent, whether it was my parents or friends or coworkers or foes, God just sent people to wrap their arms around me and support me. And so with that, it's with that like love and true, genuineness that, I just want to share today.
Y'all let those who have ears hear. It is with the sermon, and obviously out of grace that we are able to have people, who agree to have this conversation. But as you could see and as you could hear, rather, my sister gets it. And so what's interesting is that even our introduction was somewhat of a bridge around faith, right? I remember us being introduced, I think, through a mutual sister. I think after kind of a sermon that was done, and then from there having a conversation. And it was interesting. So it's interesting kind of seeing full circle how these introductions happen with no planning or nothing at all. It's serendipitous and divine. But I would love, because I think, people hear the headline, they hear, my goodness, head of multicultural marketing at Cadillac, and they want to understand the journey. And so I would love
Mhm.
for you to kind of bring us back. I always say like this Detroit week, bring us back to kind of like to Michigan, bring us back to kind of talk about your family, where it started, and kind of what cultivated this view that, oh, wow, this is the path I'm going to be on. And then how did even faith intertwine into your early story? So start us from Genesis for your story.
Mhm. Ooh, this is a long story. So I'm going to do my best to kind of condense it into what I would call some key
Yeah.
moments. I will say I'm one of 11. So I have five brothers and five
Mm.
sisters. My dad had a wonderful time in the 70s and early 80s. And but the things that we actually weren't Christian. So I did become a Christian at like 17, but we still had church at home, which is super interesting. My dad was Jamaican. My grandmother was also born in Cuba, went to Jamaica. And so my grandmother and father has locks. So that was part of kind of that culture and that movement. It was like you Rastafarian, you knew the Psalms. So we knew, first, 23rd, 24th, 27th, we knew like growing up, just even at having church at home, like we were studying, like and then when my parents decided to get separated when I was 17, my mom was like, I started in the church. We going back to the church,
Mm.
and so we did. And it was interesting because at that time I was like, like personally, I felt like we had spent, I spent many of my years feeling like Christians, why do they follow this Jesus? What is it about him? Why? And I think, early in the school year, and then I went off to college later on in the year, and kind of my Christian moment was my mom was dragging us to church every Sunday. And I remember just being so frustrated, being like, why is she doing a call and response? Won't she just be quiet? And it
Mm.
wasn't until walking across campus, I can remember in undergrad, like that distinct afternoon, walking from my dorm to the cafeteria. And I was just like, I believe. Like, I literally, at that moment, that was that. I believe probably after 6 or 7 months wrestling with God, still going to Sunday school and going to church, because if we was in the house with my mom, we were going to do that. And I literally remember that moment that I said, I believe in Christ. And then from there was, I was
Mm.
on fire, graduated from school, engineering degree in industrial engineering. Got my first job in Greenville, South Carolina. And then that wasn't a pleasant experience. On that job, I was sexually harassed, maybe, from a
Mm.
early time on there. No one touched me in any type of way, but it was more or less coming into a meeting. And I was really young. I was like 18. I mean, I was 21 at that time. Come on in here, sit right here. And they'd be rubbing on the chair. And I mean, in that time, I didn't wear any makeup. I was super, what I would call very basic. I've always been tall. So I've always been 5'11" since probably seventh grade. And so, it went to the place where people are always like, you wear too much makeup. And so someone's going to make a comment, or you dress a certain way and someone's going to make a comment. That wasn't the case. I was super, super modest at that time. If people are going to be disrespectful, they will be. And I left the
Mm.
company after about 9 months and made my journey kind of up north. I knew I wanted to be in a bigger company. I knew I had so much to offer. And so I took a job in engineering at a company called Delphi. Spent 9 years there, worked in a number of areas: sales, marketing, finance, and IT. Finished up another undergraduate degree in IT. I had lived in Greenville, had lived in Warren, Ohio, Youngstown area, and then I moved to Michigan. I've been in Michigan probably about 12 or 13 years. And from that opportunity, they asked me to go to Dubai and work on this new customer experience there. Had a project where I was supposed to be there 6 months, ended up being asked to stay a year and a half, and
3 times.
repatriated. Yeah, it was a great experience. So much rich history and culture. And was asked to come back to the U.S. And in that position, I was, at a place where it was really like me and God, because I knew I wanted to come back and repatriate, but I didn't have a job when I came back. So full transparency, I had done an amazing job, great accolades from the dealers, from our executive leadership, but I didn't have a job. A
Mm.
week after I came back, the company said, "Hey, you have 2 months to find something else, unless we're going to part ways." And so it was very frustrating because I had done amazing things. had all of these accolades, but yet didn't have a job. And so it was, a 2 month period where it was like me and God. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to take a demotion. I'm not going to do something I don't really want to do. I really knew that God had a plan. And it really, for me, was about my faith. I can remember a girlfriend of mine being like, I just want to see what God does because you are steadfast and so serious about what God has told you and his promises. And the scripture of like, I will not be begging for bread was like all that I could remember. Like, I knew I had done all of the right things and I knew I was not going to beg for a job, beg for an opportunity. And I knew just God had something more. And so after probably, I think I had 2 weeks to go before I was going to be let go. And one of my mentors called me and was like, we've worked things out. You are headed to New York. And so came to New York, started the expansion of one of our subscription programs that went off really, really well. Expanded from New York to LA to Dallas, and did all of the research and led that operation. And then the team asked me to come back to Michigan about a year and a half ago, and I've been leading multicultural efforts. Just all of that. It's been exciting.
This is wow. So first you did that seamlessly, like, and I'm not surprised because of all your seamless operations experience. But how much of your career path were
Oh,
you clear about, and how much were you like, I was just learning
yeah.
on the fly?
So okay, that's a great question. So I went to engineering school specifically because there was a T-shirt that they offered me in high school to take a field trip from Augusta, Georgia, to Atlanta to check out this textile apparel engineering degree that they had. So for the T-shirt, I said, okay, I'll go. And I went and was like, okay, I want to move from a small town into a bigger town. Engineering sounds pretty interesting. Didn't end up going to Georgia Tech. I was like, that's too overwhelming for kind of that small town girl. And so I went to Kennesaw State, which was a smaller school, but still in Atlanta. And what's interesting is my dad is an entrepreneur. So he decided that he was never going to work with anybody when he was probably, I don't know, 20. And so he's always had his own small business. And so growing up, we always worked in the family business. Like that was hands down. We were selling incense oil, shea butter. I can make all of that stuff. Leatherneck pieces when that was cool, cross colored. I mean, we was selling jewelry and accessories. We were a gift shop. We expanded a couple of locations in Augusta. So when I was very young, we were managing it with my brothers and sisters. One of the locations either opening or closing. So I've always known that I wanted to be in business. The thing was, when I decided to go into engineering school, mentally at that time, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I always have enough money and can make money to help my family. So engineering school seemed like a natural fit. I've always been curious. I've always been interested in math. And my mom has always been a person. My parents always pushed us to be excellent, to graduate from school, to just excel. It wasn't anything forceful. It just was, we always traveled. They always encouraged us and wanted us to travel. And they always, encouraged us to explore. And so we lived kind of a sheltered life, but they would allow us to explore. So engineering, as you can imagine, is very much so. And IT is more or less just exploring, figuring out, problem solving. And all of those skills are so essential now. The marketing MBA just made sense because my path was very technical. And then about 10 years ago, when I came to GM, I said, I really want to move into the softer side of the business. So I was really in IT. I knew I wanted to move into customer service. I'm calling sales soft or marketing. So it was like, excuse me, customer service, communications, or marketing. And then I thought communications was really about a lot of writing. And then I realized I did a couple of helping out the communication team. And I was like, it's really about hosting PR people. And I said, I probably long term wouldn't be interested in that. And so it's been about 7 or 8 years since I've been doing marketing. And I was like, I love the people. I love the breadth and depth of the work. I love to know that we put this on sale or we came up with this campaign, and because of that, we sold this many vehicles or we sold this many parts. So those are the pieces that help. The technical side as a foundation is really important because it helps the way I think. And the compassion and people. I'm a deacon in a Baptist church, and I have been probably now for about 12 or 13 years. So that compassion of connecting with people doesn't go away. And it's really helpful in a cold, cruel world that we're in. People just want to be heard. They want to be listened to and respected. And an example is yesterday we had a customer who was irate. She wrote a long letter to, our executive staff, and there was just a lot in the letter. It was 5 full paragraphs. And the team sent it to me, because it was talking about some of the multicultural ads, not at Cadillac, but one of our sister brands. And they were like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "I think I should call her." And they were like,
Mm,
"You think you should call her?" So I was like, "I think I should call her. We're probably around the same age. I understand her frustration. She was a small business owner." And it was just like, I shouldn't send you back an email and tell you all of the things that we do. I need to hear you. You wrote, a letter to 3 of our top ranking executives at the company. We should respectfully call you back. And
mm,
so I did. We ended up talking for 45 minutes, kind of got to the bottom of what her concerns were, and then really just talked about like what's going on with you. And she told me about her business. It's a STEM company. It's terribly failed since COVID. She's hanging on by a thread, and we just talked. And I was like, let me try to figure out a way that we can work with you. And so it's that connecting with people that I'm never worried about. Am I going to have a job? Am I going to be able to eat? No, I genuinely care for and like people. I can absolutely always get the results because much of it is sales. And I've been selling since I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that comes naturally. And caring is just part of my DNA, that God piece. And that all connects.
mm,
We connected. You can connect with so many people with God without saying it. She was like, "I'm praying." I said, "Do you still have hope?" She's like, I haven't lost my hope. So it's just, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I just see how God makes these things just happen.
mm,
And so, yes, my job looks fabulous. It looks easy, but nobody talks about the meetings that I sit in, that I'm the only African American, and I don't even realize it because agency partners like, "Whoa, we getting pitching this idea, and like you the only." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I don't even notice it because I'm so focused on like, God, you have me here doing this work, and I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. I'm not thinking about the next job or the last job. I'm focused on the here and now, and you are helping me get there. You're
mm.
helping me get through."
This is gold. One, because I think one of the things that gets lost in work is the fact that work is about people. And you're kind of talking about how not only your gifting, your disposition, the gifting that you've been having, the gifting that you have towards people, the skills that you have towards people, but how that is kind of essential in your work. But the truth is that it's essential in everybody's
Mhm,
work, but we lose sight of it. It's about the task, it's about the grunt, it's about the
mhm,
utility. I got to get this money, I need to get out. But the fact is that you were brought there for people. And so I think what's helpful for people even to see is just like, one, the fact is that you see the people element when you say softer was kind of what drove you to kind of where you are
mhm,
now. Two, part of your
mhm,
enjoyment, part of your motivation for the work that you're doing is the people. It's centered around the people,
mhm,
right? And then three, I have
mhm,
to say this, because I think this is gold for everybody, which is people lead it and usually typically say empathy, right? But there's also like
mhm,
you spoke in a
mhm.
universal language of people want to feel heard. Is that people want to be known, loved, and
That's
cared
it.
for, heard, right? And I
Mhm,
think sometimes for many
mhm,
people that is their attraction to God. That okay, out of all the people, all the
mhm,
beings in the world, there's one person who fully knows, fully sees, fully understands me. And so when someone is in the world that sees them and slows down to hear them out, I think it taps into something that we all desire, which I think it kind of is, it even is a great transition around even that moment on campus when you kind of just had
mhm,
that spirit moment where it's like I believe. Typically, sometimes of the pushback or the confusion, right, is that people see it from the outside. They're like, you just had this moment. Did somebody call you, or
mhm,
you know?
mhm.
And but sometimes I always want to ask people like, what made God appealing to you? So even once you made that decision, like why was it good news to you? Like, so after you made that decision, okay, I believe. Once you believe,
Mhm.
what made it like, this is I'm so grateful to have this. What made it good news to you?
I don't know that I saw it like that, that I'm joining this Christian band. Um, and there's a change in my life because we already were following so many Christian values, naming them something else. So I don't know that my behaviors necessarily changed. Maybe I wasn't saying God and I was saying Jesus, so that was okay. But I think more of it came later on. So, it's almost like my mom had sowed into me, the church had sowed into me, and I finally believe what was sown into me by the grace of God, the Holy Spirit. But then there was that other part, which was really the outward piece. So it's almost like it's better to give than to receive, because it's that joy that you get when you give. So a couple of years later, when I started to work and I was a missionary with a team that we taught abstinence education, waiting till you get married to have sex. I mean, it was a group of young people when I lived in Warren, Ohio. We taught in South Africa. We went on mission trips with our vacations, St. Lucia. And, we're talking about 18, 20 years ago. But what was interesting about that time is that giving was the joy. And even today, it's not like what God is doing. God is doing a lot for me, but my real joy and that promise and God's deliverance is when I can push out and give, when I can share, when I can pour into someone and see how, letting a person who's in the midst of deciding whether she's going to buy a new car or what have you, or her car that she got free from this other company is gone. And I'm like, hey, somebody told me to just call you, and we just hit it off. And I'm like, hey, let's fill in the gap here to see how we can have a working. When you can fill in gaps and serve, that's where I see God the most, because there's nothing like a person seeing that they're not worthy, but yet you're giving. Well, that's what God does for us every single day. It's so humbling for me to be like, people to be like, I can't believe you are doing this for me. I don't know. That's what God does for me every single day. So that feeling where I'm like, I had a discussion, my heart was racing. It was absolutely terrible. But God, He got me through. Like, I'm fumbling over everything. I'm a klutz. I feel like an imposter. And then I get in there and kill it. That's God. And so that's the joy of Jesus. That's the essence of who He is. That's the more. And as you get to express that more, and it's really an outward expression of our faith, not the inward, it's the outward. That's where more people can see. That's where you shine from God. Not what God's pouring in. He's pouring in because of who He is, but you're able to pour out because of what He's given you and how you need to serve. So that to me is where like the rubber meets the road in my personal life, and like where my joy comes from.
This you touched it. You captured it. You communicated that so well because um here's the thing. I think our hearts are wired. I think when people see, let's say for people who are not Christian, kind of like, what is that whole thing?
Mhm.
So much of our lives are wired around performance, right? It's A plus B. I do A, and then I get this. I earn this. I get this. The idea of
Mhm.
grace is so foreign, right? And kind of
Mhm.
hearing what you're saying is saying, like the reality is, I think soon, I think by grace, some people get to that stage, right? That many people get to that stage where you realize, like,
Mhm.
I can't be good enough all the time. I can't, like, I just can't. And
Mhm.
or when
Mhm.
you get aware enough that, wow, I literally don't deserve half all of just everything that I'm
Me,
experiencing, so many things, and
me.
giving God
Mhm.
credit for that. I think that's so huge because even that question around like what made God appealing. Partly you're talking about like, look, what I get to do and what I get to experience is like just like out of His character.
Mhm.
It energizes me.
Mhm.
But then ultimately you're just almost like, yo, I'm a recipient of grace. Like grace is so dope to me. And I think that still
Yeah.
boggles people's minds around man, because you get to some point where we realize like you have to understand that like this cannot be just, if it's really all on you. Would you really get up in the
Mhm.
morning? Would you leave your bed if you really felt every decision was on you?
Mhm.
Everything was on me.
Yeah, I think it's heavy. So there are people who do believe those things, and it's heavy, and they're
Mm-hmm.
depressed. They
Mm-hmm.
feel ashamed when they're not doing, because of that. And I'll also, just have some thoughts around like when people say there is no grace and they don't believe these God things, but they do. They do. They have faith. When you most people have faith that they're going to wake up the next morning and whatever it is and continue on. They have faith that their bank check is going to hit the bank account. They sit in a chair, they have faith that the legs are going to hold them up. And much of that faith comes from repeatability. So it's those stories that you tell yourself, that's what leads to, whatever is that next piece. The grace part is because most of the time we're hard on ourselves. So God forbid we could be empathetic or loving or caring to others. And I find so much grace in my interactions with others. It tends to be like I'm pumping them up or trying to uplift them, and in that I'm like, oh, just be a little bit more gentler, a little bit more kinder. And I'll give you an example. It's like I went to the Time 100, the summit that we went to. That night was the gala, and I was in my mind, trying to run around and get pictures with celebrities, and like that was, I was working, but I was also like, oh, I've never been in a room with, all of these amazing, here are 40 to 50 of past recipients, a room of 200. Wow, it's awesome. Taylor Swift is sitting behind me at a table. Just everybody is there. And it wasn't until I went upstairs and The Rock was at a table with our CMO, and me and my sister was with me. She's usually my partner in crime, because we could take a plus one. And so when I met him, I was like, he turned and he just like paused. So here we are trying to rush for the break to get upstairs to say hello. And like he just paused and literally was like, I'm Dwayne. What's your name? Versus I'm like, can we get a picture? Like I'm moving at 1,000 miles an hour to get in front of people. And he literally just slowed the whole room in true humility, like, what's your name? How are you doing? And it was with that, like, just pure grace. Like he was the highest person kind of in the room for the night. It was with that I took back, like, if that dude can slow a room and just see who I am, then who more am I when I step into any other room where people are like, I want to talk to the lady at Cadillac. Can you I got an ID. I was just like, from that moment, it's so memorable to me. And that was over a year and a half ago, April of last year. Like, I was like, anytime I'm in a room and I don't have enough time and I just want to run out of a conference after a speech or whatever, there's a lady who follows me and texts me. It's been over a year from a conference that I literally was like, I just can't not pause and speak to her. And I'm still praying for her father, whom I probably will never meet. But she just, Alexis, how are you doing? How's it going? I'm doing, so it just slowed me. And I think it's that slowness that God at times just grabs me and captures me. And it's like, hey, let's slow down. And it's that level of humility that you always need, no matter what position you're in. You always could get fired. You always could get hired. You always could get moved. There's always somebody better, hotter, cuter, sweeter, smarter,
Bam.
who's prayed up even more. And so it's that God's grace that you're like, how you deal with people. And also it's that grace as to how people are dealing with you too.
These are bars one. Now kind of you ended on the Philippians too, man. He emptied himself of
Yes.
all glory, all
Hallelujah.
things, all riches, right?
Yes.
It's the picture
Yeah.
of humility, right? The Philippians 2 is the iconic
Yeah.
scripture. Um, but this is,
Mhm.
but where you even hit on is so timely, because think about this season. How many people going in things like this? You had a job, changed like this. You're at the top of this, moved off P&L, lost job like this. And
Mhm.
so that humility you're saying of just like, who are we? But a win, but a snap. One day you could have it. One day. So
Yeah.
how should I be? Right. And that humility, I think, is a timely message. And I
Mhm.
think people may have gotten that message where they're getting
Mhm.
it from you and hearing it from the experience, or they got it
Mhm.
from life right now,
Mhm.
where they're
Mhm.
realizing like, wow, I was on the top, or I had everything. Now I have quote unquote nothing. I have my life. I
Mhm.
have my everything. Wow, how might I approach this differently now? And I think lastly, you kind of pick up. You can only give out what you've received. And so I think if anything else, right, your ability to be gracious, your ability to slow down. There's the literal
Mhm.
Dwayne Rock Johnson doing that and you
Mhm.
receiving that, but as a picture of
Mhm.
God slowing down. Like, who is he that we are? He's
Mhm.
mindful of. Like, he's mindful of us. Who's mankind,
Mhm.
right? That he is mindful of
Mhm.
us. That he slowed down. That he broke through history through Jesus to come and dwell with us.
Yes.
He slowed down because he doesn't even exist in time. And
Mhm.
so I think that is so powerful for brothers and sisters to hear. I don't want to lose this point that you brought up, because there's so many gems, there's so many things that we're gonna lift up from this piece. But when you talked about your childhood, because I think, me being in a privileged position to be able to walk with a number of brothers and sisters and disciple them around the faith and really understanding what this is, so that they could do this for their families, so that if they could do this for their
Mhm.
friends or others that God will put in their path.
Mhm.
But sometimes this discussion around children, right now you're an
Mhm.
amazing godparent, team godparents. I'm godparent out here, so we try to do
Mhm.
our best with that. But there's also sometimes the view is, we're called to raise our children, right? And so for not having children, or anything like that, but looking about your experience where there was these seeds planted that were grooming, and then there was a moment, right? I think it talks about how important that is, because I think we live in
Mhm.
a time where people are just like, I'm gonna let my child do what they want. They're gonna find and discover. It's like, no, we're called to do that. Those seeds, you need to plant those seeds.
Mhm.
Those seeds, trust me, it will sprout. You know, how much of kind of just gratitude do you give to your parents these days, right? Because obviously no one has perfect parents, no one has a perfect journey. But like, thinking about your faith, how much do you kind of give thanks that how formative that was for you?
Yeah, it's you know, good solid ethics, morals and value, loving on, serving, those things can yeah, first of all, there's so much gratitude. When I got my first promotion to, manager within the organization, my dad was the first person I called. I'm like, Dad, I got it. He's like, yes, okay, you need to go read the Four Agreements. Like that. He literally was like, it is that Escalade never stop arriving. It's like, great, I'm celebrating with you. Take this note, go read the Four Agreements. It literally was like that. And I remember calling my mom. She's like, super excited. So it's always he was just saying, like, when you lead people and you have a bigger responsibility, make sure you don't take nothing personal. And that, like, was the biggest thing that I took away from the Four Agreements. And so people are like, how can you be, somebody be nasty with you and then you just be like, it's okay, or disrespect you in a meeting. And I'm like, there's a book that says, after, if someone disrespects you three times, then you speak to them after the third time, because you have true evidence that they have disrespected you. Sometimes people are curtain nasty because it's the day,
Mhm.
it's the moment, it's the meeting that they had, it's the argument during COVID, it was the yelling at their kids. But after the third time, you have direct evidence that it's channeled towards you. But personally, I just don't take many things personal. Like,
Mhm.
I understand if we have a good conversation, a bad conversation, I'm more or less going back and thinking to myself, okay, something may have happened. I'm going to pray about it. And even when there are those moments when it is purposefully, I just go ahead and address it privately. I just do. I found that to be so much more effective, and people appreciate that. And much of that came from my parents. I didn't know my parents argued because they would go in the car and argue. So, like,
Mm.
my childhood was very shielded, and
Mhm.
it was very shielded because that was purposely, how, our mother and father ran the household. It was like positive family images. We were helpful, we were supportive, we, cooked, all of those things very much so at home at a time when it was not very, popular. I feel like I was very old fashioned. I still have what I would call old fashioned morals and values, but much of that I attribute, to my parents and the upbringing that I had, and just those things that, they didn't necessarily say, but they instilled into you. Like, my brothers and sisters, we all are always trying to be helpful. What can we do? How can we help? If someone's in need, we're like, okay, we need to do this. So we're always about, the family unit, especially when we're out in the street. Yeah,
Mm.
and those are, again, that's my parents.
Mm. I think that will sit among so many other things. That will sit with people, because I think that there's so many of our peers, friends that have children, and you want to do the best. There's like it's.
Mhm.
I think there's almost a paralysis of what should I be doing? And I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the major decisions that I see with many younger parents is, around faith. I want them to explore, and I think people need to hear enough about how much of a responsibility it is for them to instill, right, the faith and the
Mm-hmm.
foundation beyond obviously in general universal things. But I think that that's a responsibility. I think, given the nature of the work that you do and all the responsibilities that you have. I always laugh when I'm communicating with. I'm a broken record with Alexis. I'm like, you take your Sabbath, right? Like, you know what I mean? But what is your rhythm? Because I want to take people in the day in life, because I think sometimes the disconnect for many people when it comes to faith is just practically, what does this look like beyond I go Sunday or whatnot. Like,
Mm-hmm. and
walk me through your day, and then as you kind of walk through the day, I'd love
Mm,
to hear kind of like, how do you feel most connected to God? Like, if you had like a weekend to yourself, what would you do? So kind of start with like, what are your
mm.
rhythms with God? What does it look like from sun up to sundown, if it is built
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah, we have our moments. We're in a moment. But typically I will wake up, roll over and just pray. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't even know what to say to you, Lord. Thank you for, I find myself in these just moments of, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It literally, I'm going to roll over before I step out of the bed and just pray. And usually that's combined with God putting people on my mind. So like at the
Mm.
end of the prayer, I'm before I roll out of bed, I'm gonna text them. How you doing, sis? How you doing, Sally? Terry, I was just thinking about you. And so that is usually the beginning of texting people that are on my heart and mind. So like whenever, if it's during the day, if somebody's on my mind, I'm just gonna text them, how you doing? Try to make a call at a break. So that usually is out of the bed, check my emails, brush my teeth, cup of coffee. So that is usually typically the start. Depending on when my first meeting starts and the overnight fires, I'll try to go for a walk. So almost every morning, even if it's cold, even if it's hot, I will try to get about 3.5 miles and go for a walk. So on the walk, I'm answering the emails, I'm doing everything. So if there's a meeting that starts at 9, I'm trying to go for a walk from 8 to 8:45 just to get out, enjoy nature, breathe. I don't like to listen to music. I just like to listen. To the sights and sounds of the city, so which is pretty interesting. Most people are like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I will be responding to emails and what have you. Come back home, um, may or may not shower right after that first meeting, but first meeting, probably shower, put some clothes on nowadays.
Thank goodness for Zoom, mate.
Because now everybody wants to be face to face.
Skype.
They're like, hit it. Yeah. So usually, after maybe a meeting or what have you, do that and then come back out. But there's usually responses, I would say, along the way to people. Now I'm trying to eat specifically 2 meals a day versus three. So I might eat a piece of fruit early in the morning and then maybe eat about 5 or 6 after. If I don't go get a chance to walk in the morning throughout, and there's an array of meetings. So I probably have 10 to 12 meetings a day. So they are anywhere from an hour to 30 minutes are typically the shortest ones. So just meeting with people who want to do business with Cadillac, meeting with people we're already doing business with, contracts, suppliers, our agency of record, trying to come up with ideas as we think about 2020. Most recently, I've been invited to a lot of speaking panels, so I may start my day 6:45, 7 much earlier, so I can have that time to speak on a panel. They typically are, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour. And then the night is usually, or evening is usually cooking. So I try my best to cook 2 or 3 times a week. So I just have enough food for the entire week. It just makes it a little bit much more easier for me. And then the evening, if I don't get a chance to walk, I'll walk like at 6 o'clock. So I'll take my last couple of meetings if I do have meetings later, kind of walking. So walking is really a time for me to kind of just enjoy nature and breathe because I think that piece is always important. I used to love walking late nights in New York through Brooklyn, just through the city. I have always enjoyed running and exercising. I can play nearly every sport except hockey. So this summer I played.
He's like, let me just note that.
I love.
Let me be clear. Let me be clear.
Yes, people are like, let's go ice skate, and I'm like, I cannot ice skate, so I don't know how to play hockey. But everything else, and I'm even if I'm not good, I'm gonna talk trash like I'm good. So, and I will have the outfit
Y'all
down.
heard. She's all smoke, no fire. You know what I mean? So make sure you're good.
Look, I'm always like, but I can beat you. So, yeah, lots of tennis, lots of golf this summer. So I spent, I would maybe get up, play 9 holes from like 7 to 8:30, and then take meetings. So I do this summer. I did play a lot of tennis and golf just because I love being outside. But yeah, typical day, lots of meetings, lots of calls. And the evening is usually I try to even during COVID just try to meet up with friends or somebody's boat or something or sports just to take some of the stress off.
What I love about is it makes sense. I think, and people throughout this conversation, I think what people take away is how much you root faith and how faith informs how you just think about, engage, consider people. And even how that even is shaped in the rhythm of your day, that you wake up, you pray, have a conversation, connect with God. And then the first thing that comes to mind is reaching out of that time when you think about people. And then ultimately being present enough to think about people. One of the things I always talk about is just like, especially in the holidays, sometimes I'm just like, I want to put a message that says, just call them. Like sometimes I want to put a post because just so often people come across our minds, right? Or we're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to blah, 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 blah. But like with the fragility of life, I think people have seen in this time.
Yes.
It is very rare that calling someone, unless they explicitly have told you, do not call me, will be a negative thing. And so seeing that being built into your rhythms and how it's actually connected out of time of prayer is good. I think the third thing I think that comes to mind is just clear is that how much is silence and time, and I won't even say so much silence, but that you cut out noise and you walk, and so sometimes that solitude, right, whether or whatever it is keen. Would you say that is kind of like how you most connect with God? Like, if you're like, what, I need my time with God, I am unencumbered or unattached for the next couple of days, what would you do? What would you design for yourself? My senses, my hunch is that it would include silence, nature, but maybe I'm off.
Yeah, it does. But some of my best times with God or just best epiphanies are long showers. And I'm not talking about like 15, 20 minutes. I mean, and I think that's because there is no phone, there is no anything, and there's no distraction. The thing about walks is somebody may call me or somebody may text me, the sights and sounds of the city. But a shower or a bath where my phone is to the side or what have you, that could be like I say, 15 minutes to 45 minutes of just chill time. That usually is more or less the time where I'm like, okay, there is no phone. There's nothing distracted. Okay, God is just like, for the most part, when I'm getting great ideas, they are that morning shower before I hit the rest of the day, or that evening shower, afternoon shower where I'm running. It's like, oh, think about that, think about this, or before my evening prayer, I'm starting to get into, because my mind is usually racing with ideas. Just write them down. Just write them down. Then I may meditate, then pray, or pray, then meditate, but just write them down. And I always try to do an evening stretch routine that's like, I don't know, it's like 8 to 10 minutes, and you can do it in a bed. So there's this Women Works app that I use that I just evening stretches. I think it's super important just to like kind of take you down. So it's almost like stretch, read my Bible, or it's usually the app, some app experience, and then go into prayer and try to take it down for the night. Yeah.
I think people should hear. I think they hear clearly that the lack of distraction, that that when you're in that time, in that shower, that you're able to connect the most with God. But you even threw in there kind of that evening prayer. People are like, you should have put that in the first thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I said, I ain't say that. I don't want people to know. Like, look, I want to wake up in the morning. No, Jesus, no, he's all in the mix. And I think one thing I will say about prayer is that we always sometimes think it has to be so elaborate. And sometimes I'm just on the move, on the move. Like one of the kids today was like, what are you doing before you eat? I was like, oh yeah, I pray before I eat any meal. Like, even if it's a snack, I'm literally like, God, thank you please nourish this food, for my body, something. But it just is, it's always that constant. I think I heard somebody say that, like, a couple of minutes, God, I just need your help before I go into this presentation. God, keep me calm. Let your Holy Spirit reign. So it doesn't have to be anything just, over the top, 20 minutes. Oh, stop it. It can just be a word, a breath. Lord, I need you. And it works.
Mm.
It works for me anyway. It's worked.
If not anything, it forms you. It kind of builds a greater alliance. It calms you down. Whether the outcome is exactly the way you envision it or not, that just continues to build, right? What you water grows. And so the more I talk to somebody, the better this relationship and the stronger it becomes. And so I think that de-episoding it, so to speak, or just like making it less of the occasion production and more of the it's just in the rhythm of my day as I speak to other people, I speak to
Yes.
God, is really powerful. There's so much I think we could. I think we need to almost do a part two. What I'm curious because I love even our conversations. It's just I think there's a lot of wisdom and things just talking about life and things happening. But I would love for you to I think as people are sitting in this time and someone who is just you know again kind of having a greater attention to kind of God, hearing more about God, like what would be your not saying the advice, but what would be something you would just share with somebody who's curious about still getting curious about faith, still unsure about where it lands, like get out of your experience, like what would you say to them right now in the time that we're living in? What would be what would that conversation look like if I'm just saying, hey, this person's curious, what would you say to them?
That it doesn't look like anything specific for you.
Mm.
It doesn't. It doesn't. The real problem is that, and one I had to move away from myself was that, oh, a Christian, her skirt is this long, she never curses, she all of these things. But all of these things that I was at times, and then at times I wasn't. But that didn't mean I don't love God. That doesn't mean I'm not going hard for Jesus. That doesn't mean that I am not living the values of what God created me to be. The problem is that people feel like I have to look like Lawrence. I have to sound like him. I gotta move like him. I gotta live like him. I gotta drive what he drives. That's what success would. That's what God's blessings. That's not true. That's not true. I was still a Christian when I was lost. God still loved me when I didn't believe who he was. When I was a person who was like, them Christians are stupid. God still loved me. Like at 13, at 15, at 17. God still loved me at 25. God still loved me at 27. He loved me while I was doing mission trips on fire for him. And he loved me before I was a deacon for him. And he loved me before he loved me all of this time. And the problem is that people think it has to look like I gotta go here. I gotta say this. And now COVID, you don't have to be nothing, but just have a relationship with God. But just try. But just think. Just read. It don't have to look like nothing. And shame on whomever for making people feel like it has to look eventually as you grow closer. God shows you don't need to say that. You don't need to do that. You don't need to use that. He when he pulls you closer, it's like and that's why it's a babe in Christ, because you don't know. You might be out in the street selling your body. You might be XYZ. You might be cheating, lying, and stealing, but God. So the closer he draws you, and that takes time because he's drawing all of the other creeps around you. He's working with us. He's molding us like clay. And so the journey can start at any point in time, at any place that you're at. The fallacy is that we say, oh, that person is gay, he's not a Christian, or that person is this, she's fast, or he's this, he's poor. But who but God determines? I don't know. Who but God? So we also have to work on ourselves, because I'm too busy with myself and my people of influence. I'm like, girl, think about that. And people are too busy helping me, like the people who love me, the people who care. Because when you go to someone in God's grace with his humility and say, hey, I'm thinking this decision that you're making, or this may not be what you want to do. Then they're like, okay. That's the Jesus in you. It's not the this pointing fingers. It's the let me help you tarry. Let me help carry that load with you. And it's that essence that needs to be in us when we approach and we try to grow the kingdom. It's that essence that's going to draw people unto him, not even us, but draw people unto him. And out of that essence is like what makes you persevere, which makes you not take it personal, which allows us to always be sowing seed, always, always. And so that's what I would say.
You're gonna free some people up, sis. You're gonna free some people up there. You know, if I be lifted up, I draw all men to me. And he was lifted up, and he's drawn all men to the end of the nations, all men and women, woman, child. He's called all. And in all the biblical narrative that we see real people in a moment in time, that he had stories from Ruth to so many other people who you would never think would be captured in the scriptures, who were lifted up because of what and who they believed in at the well. That woman who no one, not even the women in early in the morning, would go and bring water for her, but he saw her. And she had 5 husbands. And she helped start a church because she went and told people what he did. I think that message is going to resonate. And I think because of the way our hearts are wired on this side of glory, before knowing Christ, it is, I obey, then you love. If I work hard, then they'll pay me. If I do this, then, right? But God is no, because he loved. The story is because he loved, I obey. I don't obey, and he loves. Because he loves, I obey. And I think that is going to free people up to be where they are, knowing they're transformed, knowing that they're called to greater, but know that they're standing on love as opposed to working for love. And I think that is an amazing message for people to hear, and it's an amazing message for us to end on. And I'm so thankful. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of those who are listening and seeing. We are so thankful for where you are, that God has placed you in a position of influence, using however, whatever he will use, for you to just be there caring for people. I'm just thinking about the people you get to work with, the clients you get to work with, the partners you get to work with, those of influence and culture that you get to work with and pour into. We thank God for that. We thank God for that. We have to actually give you a tee off. I mean, what do you got going on? We got Never Stop Arriving. What do you have heads up so how the brothers and sisters could support you individually, family? How could we support you? What's going on?
So obviously I'm leading culture at Cadillac, but there's a lot of other new stuff that's coming. It would be amazing if people will follow me on social. Clubhouse is a new dope app that I think many of you should give a try. I will just let you do your own research and give it a try. But Clubhouse is interesting. But on Twitter and Instagram, I am Alexis Kerr, written out like that. I am Alexis Kerr, first and last name. So I'd love for you to join me there. A lot of new stuff coming that in the next couple of months are going to be even better than what you've seen before. And I think just pray for one another, uplift one another, be kind and gentler to yourself. What would be amazing to me is just a holiday season that you surprise and bless someone who does not have, and does not have could mean stuff, but really just does not have anyone to call on them and check on them and see about them. That would be amazing to hear about some of those stories, especially Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever holidays you celebrate. That would be great. And just to connect. I'm a people person, so I love seeing what other people are doing and supporting. Would love to hear about ways you think I could be supporting you, or things Cadillac as a brand could be doing in a number of the communities that I'm serving. I would love to hear about those too.
Alexis, we thank you. We thank God for you. Have a great day,
Thank
my
you.
sister. Speak soon.
You too. Thanks. Bye.